The ideas that gave birth to our nation are the ideas that our nation is resistant to right now, and we should talk about that all the time.
In a world where narratives are shaped by corporations and gatekeepers, independent voices matter more than ever. Badlands Media brings together citizen journalists, researchers, and independent thinkers.
The truth is triggering.
Question the narrative. Explore the facts.
It's authenticity, courage, resilience.
Search for the truth others won't.
It's not about being first or being right.
The information war is changing.
It's about being authentic.
Embrace the friction.
Embrace the friction.
Shut the f*** up.
Authentically antagonizing. Join the movement.
I'm going to say how I feel.
Follow Badlands Media.
This is about the future.
The Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, good morning, Badlandia. Welcome to Badlands Daily.
It really feels like the cat with the laser pointer. It's like you've led the cat up to the top of the building, and now you're leading it over the edge.
President Trump is rebalancing trade around the world and making things more fair for the American people.
I think that anytime the deep state can like overcapitalize in whatever situation they have, they're going to.
But the rest of it is a very well organized and well funded color revolution operation of the type they run all over the world again and again and again to destabilize entire society.
All right, good morning, Badlandia. Happy Friday. Welcome to Badlands Daily, joined by the one and only Chris Paul. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, man. Burning Bright and I just moved to the late night slot on Thursday nights for Badlands Story Hour. So I have Thursday night and then immediately the next show. It's like do Story Hour, sleep, do daily.
Oh man, that I'm the same way because I do. Well, wait. So what time are you doing Story Hour now?
It starts at 10:30 Eastern.
Oh, so you switched with G.
Well, yeah, G's not doing his show for a little while and kind of just going to take a different approach. So the slot opened up and BB and I slid over there.
So now I won't feel so bad when I go over with sit rep right before you guys.
Well, you know what's funny is, like, I know you're joking and talking shit, but you actually can do that because we play like a 15-minute stretch of clips from the film at the beginning. But it starts 5 minutes early. So, 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes.
10 minutes extra.
Yeah.
So Alpha and I have gone over a few times, and one time we went over and G had like a really good guest on, and he got pretty mad at me, but other than that, he's pretty cool about it. He doesn't mind. But that was the one time he was like, bro, that was the one time I didn't want you to go over. And I was like, I'm sorry, man. We went over by a lot, but that's good to know. It didn't hit me. I know, because we switched Why We Vote. We took your old slot and moved Why We Vote from Friday to your old slot on Tuesday. And it didn't hit me that you guys that were filling in there for a while.
So how did it go? Did you already do one on Tuesday yet?
No, not yet. This Tuesday is going to be the first one.
Cool. So you're doing one today and then one Tuesday.
Yes, we are doing one today. So today's is a pre-record because today is my wife's birthday. So happy birthday, Christy.
Happy birthday.
Yes. And, plan on, I have no idea what I'm going to do. So she's watching now. So she's probably like, that son of a bitch doesn't know.
No, that's how you keep them guessing, buddy.
Well, I mean, Wednesday night we went out for her birthday. Last night we went out to a nice dinner with her parents for her birthday. And then I guess I gotta figure out I got to figure out the me thing. But she knows. I mean, we've been married 17 years. She knows that I am a last minute guy. Like, I won't know where we're going until we get in the car. So
if it's been 17 years, well, you have to decode that, and that will answer your question about what to do for her birthday.
She'll get in the car and I'll be like, trust the plan, babe. Trust the plan.
Yeah. What is the plan? Wait, have you ever seen my, this is one of my favorite clips of all time. Have you ever seen the movie MacGruber?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Good. Here is one of the greatest little scenes from MacGruber, and it makes me think of exactly what you were talking about, trusting the plan. If only I could find it.
Well, here, let's play our first sponsor, and then
let's do that
as soon as you get back.
Yeah. Your body doesn't need more synthetic fixes. It needs real plant medicine. Wild herbs are packed with minerals, adaptogens, and healing compounds your body actually recognizes and can use, supporting energy, immunity, and balance from the inside out. At Tamarac Garden, our supplements bring these overlooked weeds and wildflowers back into your daily routine. Don't just manage symptoms, support your body and eat your weeds. Head to tamaracgarden.com for $10 off your order of $50 or more when you use code BADLANDS at checkout.
All right, there we go. Tamarac Gardens. Love the folks over there. All right, you got it now?
Sure.
That went great. That was fucking tits. Gruber, what the hell was that? It's called sending a message. And I think it will be received loud and clear.
That's what I'm worried about.
Why?
Because he thought you were dead. That was a huge advantage.
Yeah, now he's gonna be coming for us.
Exactly. It's all part of the plan.
What is the plan?
I kind of make it up as I go.
That's not really a plan, then.
Okay, so it's not a plan. Look, I'm not good with plans. And I'm not good with clues. What I am good with is kicking ass and ripping throats. So Cuntha's gonna come after me? Well, bring it on. Because then he'll be on my turf playing my game. And that's not a game I plan on losing. Let's go.
I got to save that clip. So whenever Christy's like, you didn't plan anything? And I'll be like, I'm not very good at making plans.
Yeah. I'm not good with plans, and I'm not good with clues.
I kick ass and I rip throats.
Right. Yeah.
All right, guys. Smash that. Why is this thing being all laggy all of a sudden? Smash that thumbs up if you have not done so already. And let's get into the show. I don't know what's going on here, but it's being a little, is it being laggy for you or is it just me?
I have not seen that lag, but that's me. I'm like paying attention to, I was finding my video. I was paying attention to the chat.
All right, let's get into the show, and we'll start out here. We're going to talk a little bit about, and we've beaten this to death, but whoa, hey, no Badlands, no AC/DC. Let's jump into the Virginia story because this is heating up, and we've talked about this all week since Tuesday, and it's a story that won't go away. And I think I honestly think there might be some sort of a plan here. Not that I made the plan because I'm terrible at planning, but let's dive into this. The Wall Street Journal put this story out here. Republicans are worried the redistricting fight is backfiring. Look, I'm going to, Chris, we have to put on our normie glasses here for a minute. We have to presume that the system is somewhat functioning and legitimate and everything else, and that elections actually are, at least on the surface level, real. I know this is going to be difficult. I'm
not even sure what any of that means.
Well, they've got a 14-year-old running for governor in, I think, like Vermont or something like that. So, it is what it is.
Hopefully that kid will win.
I am throwing my complete and total endorsement behind the 14-year-old in Vermont. So here we go. Republicans are worried the redistricting fight is backfiring. It says Republicans are increasingly worried that a battle President Trump started last summer to redraw congressional district lines has backfired and may hand more seats to Democrats. At best, some Republicans say the effort will produce only a small gain in the number of GOP House seats. Some have questioned why President Trump's political machine didn't spend more resources on Tuesday's election in Virginia, given the narrow outcome. Oh, I don't know. Maybe they're going to answer the their own question in the very next sentence. Let's see. Voters in Virginia on Tuesday passed one of the nation's most aggressive gerrymanders that, should it survive court challenges, would put Democrats in position to win 10 of the state's 11 House seats and leave the party with a slight overall advantage in the nationwide redistricting war. So just going to lay this out here. So if the court battle fails and they don't win those 10 seats, the slight advantage for Democrats would be a pretty good advantage for Republicans in this war, right? Just making sure we define the terms here, because this is one of the stupidest fights that Democrats could have got into. And Trump knows exactly what he's doing by not spending any money by his people. You know, I'm sure Trump wasn't like the one that said, hey, don't spend any money in Virginia. Maybe he was, but his people.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think it makes any difference whether Virginia is 10-1 or 6-5 or whatever it is. So
I agree with that.
Go ahead. Okay.
Quote, we should have anticipated and played 3 or 4 moves ahead. We should have known that there was going to be a response to Texas, said Don Bacon, retiring after this year. We'll pay for this in November. Okay, so we can stop that story right there for just a moment. Okay. Again, the Democrats spent over $62 million in this race. Overall, they spent $83 million in total, which means, I guess, conservatives, people for the yes or the no vote, spent $21 million. So 62 to 21, 3-to-1 spending, basically. Trump knew this was not going to go anywhere. He bled. They bled a lot of money out of Democrats, and Democrats do not have a lot of money in this upcoming election. The Act Blue thing has really taken a toll. I think some of the other funding that Trump has cut to, government bureaucracies has taken its toll. They don't have that money laundering machine like they did last year. I haven't looked recently, but the last time I saw, like, the GOP was absolutely crushing the Democrats in terms of fundraising for the midterms. I think all that's pretty stupid. I'm with you on that, and I know you'd say the same thing. I'm pretty sure you'd say the same thing. But I do want to keep going on this story because, again, with the Southern Poverty Law Center story coming out and everything, I do think that this is a situation that could end up escalating into something. If the powers that be want to push this in a certain direction, they can utilize this to instigate, like, hysteria, essentially, right? They can turn this into a war. Go ahead.
Well, for sure. And instigating hysteria is one of the main purposes of the election psyop that we participate in every couple of years. You talked about the amount of money, and that does sound like a lot of money in a race over a ballot measure for the organization of congressmen in a state. If we are to believe that the government is legitimate and that the people's house is important, that they might impeach Trump, that they need to have a Republican majority to help Trump pass his agenda, even though he has not made use of the Congress at any point at all, isn't then this quote unquote election much more valuable than $83 million? We hear about how the presidency is worth billions or potentially trillions of dollars for the people who are able to influence these outcomes, because so much in the world is riding, we are told, on who the president is. So now you have the ability in the narrative to either impeach Trump and potentially successfully by winning the Congress this fall, or protect Trump and pass his agenda if it goes the other way. So that would then be like a mirror of the same functionality of the president being put in office, which would suggest that the race is just as valuable as the presidency. And $83 million does not suggest that it is anywhere near as valuable, because the elections aren't real. And that's not what the point of them is. And the power isn't actually changing hands, regardless of the breakdown of Democrats and Republicans in Virginia. And this is, I understand that hearing that one time is probably maybe not enough to grasp it. But if you think about this, we are told that the redistricting in Virginia can dictate by itself, potentially, whether or not the House is red or blue. And if it's red, thank goodness Trump wins. And if it's blue, oh no, Trump is going to be removed. If either of those two things were true, that would make this race, especially considering Trump isn't in it, even more valuable than presidential elections that Trump is in, because the narrative hill to climb to convince people one way or the other on a midterm race or a ballot measure in primary season is much lower than it is when Trump is being elected. So again, this whole scenario is total bullshit from the bottom up.
Yep. I'm with you 100%, dude. This thing is it's really fun, but the point that I think that is going to become very relevant when this is overturned, and I think there's a hearing on it on Monday, is the hysteria, and not hysteria as in like, oh, we got to win. I'm telling you, they're going to go out there and they're going to use this to incite the idea that Trump is a fascist, that the GOP Republicans are all fascists, that they took away the will of the people. We voted for this and they took it away. They used the courts. Trump is weaponizing the justice system. Like the whole thing is just going to get piled on this.
Yes, you're exactly right. And last week, Steve Bannon had Sean Spicer on. I think it was Thursday or Friday. And Spicer was talking about, and this scenario sounds entirely made up, just for the record, but he was saying that the Supreme Court decision on redistricting was being delayed intentionally by the 3 liberal justices who were refusing to submit their dissenting opinion, and that meant the court couldn't release the decision. Well, that's a very thin cover for the fact that the court was not going to release the decision, which was probably done to mess up the narrative that was going to be told about this fake election. And so you have a narrative operation versus a narrative operation, because the story that the regime is attempting to tell must be told and must be successfully sold to the public. They have arranged this entire system of stories to work in conjunction and push their agenda ahead. If that narrative operation is disrupted, then the agenda cannot be pushed forward. So they try to protect the narrative operation at all times. If you know what they're going to do and you tell the world about it before they do, then the public discussion already happens before they can release the news. And if nobody likes the thing that they're about to release, when they release it, it immediately fails. That is an operation Trump runs over and over and over again. And if you consider that the regime has generally their hands on all the levers, whether it's media or finance or, the political outcomes in elections, whatever it is, if you consider that Trump may have his hands on some of those levers as well, he can use that to completely ruin their narrative operation, because the truth will always win out when the two are presented side by side.
So I want to play this clip, and then I got to, I want to kind of discuss the Wall Street Journal where they're talking about the war of the redistricting. But so this clip right here, this is CNN. Okay, this is CNN News laying out literally the same thing. I wrote an article the day after. So and you guys have heard this because I've talked about it. I think we've talked about it just about every single day this week, especially with Ash and with Ash on Wednesday. But when I saw, everything that took place before the Tuesday election, and to be fair, I was not aware of all of this beforehand. Most people weren't. Some people were, but most people weren't aware of this, and most people aren't aware of it after. And as soon as the election was over, you get this same judge that has been presiding over this case at the circuit court level since the beginning of this. He goes out there and puts this injunction, and everybody's celebrating that injunction. And if they're on the right, and if they're on the left, they're saying, "Oh, this is a rogue judge who's been doing this." And if you go back and historically look, this judge has been spot on, absolutely spot on. So again, this is CNN. It's almost, and I'm not saying they did, because anybody with half a brain could have figured this out, but it's almost as if they read my article and just decided, let me put this into Chat GPT and have it put it into a 3-minute segment that I can talk about. Check this out.
As always, do you think this challenge in Virginia has a chance of succeeding?
I do think it has a chance of success. This battle is not over. So if you look at their various challenges here brought by the RNC and other Republican entities, they're basically making 2 types of challenges here. One is substantive. So they're arguing that the way the question was phrased on the ballot was unfair, was misleading. And there is some legitimacy to that. I mean, the question asks, do you want to, quote, restore fairness to the process. Who's going to realistically vote no on that? I mean, a lot of people did, but it's slanted. I don't know if it's slanted enough to win the legal challenge. But the second category is the procedural challenges. And that's where I think the challengers have some real heft behind their arguments. For example, one of the laws says if you're going to do this, the Virginia General Assembly has to pass a law, and then voting, the referendum, can't start for 90 days after the law is passed. Here, we're not even 90 days out now, and the voting's done. So I don't know how Virginia is going to defend that. There's another procedural quirk, I guess, that says the way you have to do this is the Virginia General Assembly has to pass a law, then you need to have an intervening election, then a second General Assembly needs to pass the law again. And the argument here that you're hearing from the defenders is, well, the 2025 governor election, that's the intervening election. The problem is that overlapped with the first vote. So there's some procedural nuance here that I think is going to be a real problem for people defending this outcome. And I think it's going to give the Republicans a chance to actually get it knocked down on the legal challenges.
This isn't the only legal challenge, right? I mean, this referendum, this is a constitutional amendment, right. And this effort has already come through the Virginia court system. It's well acquainted with this judge, as it were. Talk to us about that.
So this judge, the same judge in Tazewell County, has tried to block the referendum even from happening twice. It went up to the Virginia Supreme Court, which essentially said, we're not going to block it. We're going to let it happen. However, they did not bless it. What the Virginia Supreme Court said is, we're going to let the referendum happen. If it's a no vote, it's moot. We don't have to get involved. Now it's a yes vote, though. And so I believe it's clearly headed back to the Virginia Supreme Court. But important to know, you'll read some of the coverage, which will say, oh, the Virginia Supreme Court has already rejected this twice. That's not quite right. What the Virginia Supreme Court has said is, if it's a yes, come back to us then, and we're not giving you any opinions yet.
There's still a step or two before it gets there, right? So what happens now?
Okay, so we can land that there. But and again, I want to kind of get your take on this, but I think what the Virginia Supreme, and you alluded to this earlier, the Virginia Supreme Court, by not ruling on this, like at what point do we look at the judiciary and ultimately their excuse was this election, while it's an election for an amendment to the Constitution of Virginia, it's a legislative process and we have no authority to intervene in this process. But when somebody brings a lawsuit and says, hey, this legislative process is in violation of the Constitution and the procedures outlined in the Constitution, that is where checks and balances comes into play. And that is where the Virginia Supreme Court should absolutely have interjected itself. And they'll say, well, we have 100 years of precedent that says that we shouldn't do that. Well, precedent first and foremost is made to be broken, right? Precedent is not that. There are absolutely circumstances in which you break precedent and say, this is a circumstance right here that is cut and dry, clear as day. And by allowing this to continue, we're costing on numerous levels. First and foremost, the civic unrest that's going to come as a result of this when they overturn this, and you're going to have half of Virginia saying you stole our voice. You took away our voice from this vote by saying that they didn't follow the Constitution, which I'm totally with following the Constitution. The other half, $83 million, is now pissed away into nothing because this whole process should have been stopped right at the head, or as the Tazewell judge said, Tazewell County judge says, ab initio, right from the very beginning. So again, the Virginia Supreme Court, all eyes should be on them, not just for their ruling as it comes down, but for their lack of balls to do something about this in the initial appeal of this case.
Yeah, I'm with you on all that. I think with the court precedent thing, it's actually even a little worse than that. Court precedent is treated as law. And because it is taken so seriously, bodies of law have been built on the back of court precedent so that the precedent would have to be overturned to in terms of the government, legitimately claim that the law in question is unconstitutional. You would have to do something as big as overturning precedent, which they make a huge deal out of. Precedent isn't anything. It's often just a wrong decision that was made by a corrupt court and by the way, judicial review is court precedent, and that's all it rests on itself. Allison Spanberger was in the CIA, and she is now the governor of Virginia by way of fake elections. Ellie, whatever his name is there on CNN, he just laid out very subtly and very quickly a case for why Spanberger's election from last year would be invalidated based on the ruling potentially. And I think that we should take a look at Trump's Truth Social post in a couple of minutes. But the last thing is, I would say this discussion happening on both sides in the court battle, and however that resolves, I wonder what effect that is going to have on the potential for canceling these midterms and whether or not the country would be comfortable with canceling the midterms. I think that the country becoming comfortable with the cancellation of midterms is a worthwhile project, and maybe the key project that people with public platforms could be promoting throughout this year, and we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, I think, okay, so let me get into kind of my was this planned out in advance kind of thought process here. So as it sits right now, well, actually not technically as it sits right now, because the Tazewell judge put an injunction on that election, so it doesn't stand right now. But if it were somehow to stand before going to the Supreme Court, let's pretend that injunction didn't exist and the previous cases now need to be heard. That would be a four seat swing for the Democrats in the House. So I was playing around with the machine, Perplexity, this morning, asking it to outline some of the redistricting efforts that have gone through, as well as some of the ones that are underway. And of course, we all know about Prop 50 in California, which is going to net five Democrat seats, flip five Republican seats to Democrats, most likely. That would counter Texas, right? Texas flipped 5 seats as well. Then you look at the other states that have done it. You've got Missouri, which adds 1 Republican seat. North Carolina, which would make Don Davis's Democrat seat in a more Republican-friendly district, so potentially flipping 1 in North Carolina. Ohio picking up 2 additional seats for the GOP, so there's 3 right there. Potentially 4 if you look at Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio. And then Utah, actually, you lose 1 because there's a Salt Lake County, I guess, becomes a little bit more blue. So you would essentially pick up 3 GOP seats with Virginia out of the mix. But what does this do, this election right here, the Virginia General Assembly and everything else pushing this forward and saying, we're going to run through this, we're going to ram this through, even though we know it's procedurally, bunk, even though we know we changed the verbiage of the bill to make it something totally misleading, and did everything in our power to put this through, knowing that it's most likely going to get overturned. Florida's going to be like, okay, let's do it. And Florida this week or next week is going to be deciding on redrawing our district maps. I should say our, because I'm a Floridian, our district maps, which would pick up between 3 and 4 seats for the GOP. So Republicans, technically, if all of this goes through, and again, you got to put on the, this is all real. Republicans walk away from this with probably anywhere between 6 to 8 extra seats. And, when you pick up seats that were previously Democrat, that's not a 6 to 8 swing. That's a 12 to 16 seat swing, right? Because the margin expands both ways. When you lose 1 and gain 1, it's broadening that gap. It's not like we're creating seats and just adding them only to the GOP. You're putting them on the GOP and taking them away from the Democrats. And so this has, if there is a way that the GOP is going to win this midterm, and again, elections are fake, so push a button and it's all, whatever. I think this whole story right here is going to end up backfiring on them, and it's all going to be on Virginia right there. Yeah, potentially. I can't get on board with pretending that all of this is real and that it wasn't all scripted and designed this way. Who wins Congress doesn't matter. It's a uniparty. So when the ultimate result doesn't matter, you have to understand that what they're trying to do is communicate certain things to the American people. Something's going to happen with the proportional representation among the states once we finally hear that the census issue has been resolved. And that's 5 or 6 years in the making. We all know which way that's going. And the truth is that populations in states are determined counting and including the number of illegal aliens in those states. How many representatives will California lose? How many representatives will Texas and Florida lose, for that matter? How many will Virginia lose? The populations are all overstated, so we don't need to go too deep into that. The other part of this, though, you're talking about the Virginia legislature. Well, what's the proof that
Virginia is blue in the first place, or that Florida is red in the first place. This is all based on fake elections that are themselves based on fake census numbers that support fake voter registrations. All of that conceptual world is supported by fake polls that tell us the country's divided 50-50. So this is just, as I've said many times, I have an article written about this. This is another example of just turtles all the way down. You can keep scratching every surface. You'll find a new surface to scratch. And under that, there's just the abyss. So, there's no place that this actually lands. I don't know that Virginia is blue. I don't know that Virginia is purple. And yet we're talking about turning our power over as a nation on the basis that Virginia is so blue that they can rig themselves a 10-to-1 proportional representation advantage. The whole system is corrupt. I have no interest in being governed in any way whatsoever by the corrupt Democrats of Virginia, much less California or Oregon or Washington or any of it. The system is broken, and no one should be turning their power over to any part of the system until it is fixed.
It's not lost on me, Chris, that visually looking at Badlands Daily right now, you've got the whole dark background, and I'm nice and bright. I've got my window over here that's casting. And I agree with you. That's the thing is, but again,
so with the founders, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, 100% on that. 100%. I don't want to get, me and Ash have a good discussion about this on why we vote tonight. Again, it's pre-recorded because it's my wife's birthday. So I already know what we said, and everything you just said right there, we're going to hit on a little bit more. And I think even at one point, turtles all the way down is brought up.
Nice.
And then also, on the narrative on Sunday, me and Burning Bright were talking about this, and that's the same thing I said. The midterms is the facade, the kabuki theater that is put out every 2 years to encourage people to dig deep into their pockets and support the person that you think is going to somehow get us out of this mess. In reality, the 30-year bureaucrats that have been working in this system for decades, those, that's where the real change needs to occur. And it's, of course, impossible to do that because President Trump, for example, the first person that's really gone hard at that system is now in a battle for, essentially, I don't want to say, his life, because people will take that as a literal thing, but for the life of the administration, they're going to be in a battle for this in November, because without Congress, President Trump won't be able to do anything. Okay, he's done plenty well with a Congress that he's got, the House and the Senate right now, who are completely unwilling to do anything that he really wants to do, and yet he's still doing it. So,
yeah. Well, they're also completely unable to do the things that they say they want to do because the body is illegitimate, and they're not going to be allowed to pretend otherwise and receive credit for doing any bit of what Trump is doing.
And then we've got this gerrymander war, this redistricting war, which is a whole nother aspect. And this is, in my opinion, this is the fakest aspect of our elections. This whole, redrawing the districts and everything else like that. If you look at all the districts, they're all bullshit, right? Again, going back to the left versus right, kind of facade. The left is way worse. I mean, California is wildly disproportionate compared to what they tell us the vote is actually out there. But this is the biggest facade. And this is just another, kind of battle that they've put the left and the right pit against each other in this battle here. And we're going to see it come to fruition, I believe, with Virginia, when the Supreme Court in Virginia does overturn this. And, play out.
I would suggest there actually is no right in American politics. There's only various brands of the left, and that was how the controlled opposition was designed. People, by and large, to a man, it's well above 90% of the people engaged in American political discussion are through and through statists. They believe that their solutions are coming from the state. They can't imagine solutions that don't begin and end with the state. And that is why people are so committed to believing that elections where they cast fake votes for predetermined outcomes are the only element of their personal power. Well, if the only element of your personal power is zero, then understand that is not where your power is. the system is still catering to the people at large. So their power must come from somewhere. It's just not that.
Yeah. Let's move on. We got another story here that kind of delegitimizes our federal government a little bit more. Before we do that,
yeah.
Before we do that, let's hit a sponsor here, and then we'll jump into this story here about how a congressman can just go missing and nobody knows about it. So, all right, parents, real talk for a second. America's about to hit a huge milestone. We're coming up on America's 250th birthday. 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-government that the world has ever seen. This is the perfect moment to help your kids understand why this country matters, not just fireworks and hot dogs, but the story behind it all. There's a free guide called The Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday, and honestly, it's a great way to introduce your kids to how America began, who the founding fathers were, what they risked, and why the ideas they fought for still matter today. This guide sends kids back to the moment when the brave men signed the Declaration of Independence, knowing full well that they were risking their lives for freedom. It breaks it all down in a way that kids can actually understand and enjoy without watering it down or turning it into boring schoolwork. If you care about raising kids who know where this country came from and why it's worth preserving, this is something that you'll want to scoop up. And the best part, it's completely free with this special offer. You just pay $2 for shipping and handling. Just head on over to freeusabirthday.com. Again, freeusabirthday.com and grab the Kids Guide to America's 250th birthday for your kids today. America's story matters. Make sure the next generation knows it. All right. And real quick, a thank you to Black Hat Destroyer, gifted 10 subs. Appreciate that.
Nice.
All right, Chris. So let's jump into this story here. New Jersey's most vulnerable GOP incumbent is MIA. Representative Tom Keene, who represents Jersey's most competitive district this November, nobody's seen from this guy in over a month. Over a month. Just gone. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody cares. First, I'm hearing about it, and I do this every single morning. Keene's team says that the two-term Congress member is facing unspecified health issues and hasn't voted since March 5th and has missed more than almost 50 roll call votes. Fellow New Jersey Republicans Chris Smith and Jeff Van Drew said that they've called and texted Keene out of concern for his health, but neither have heard from him. I mean, like proof of life. Hello. Don Bacon, representative, there he is again, said he didn't even realize that Keene had been missing until he tried to find him on the House floor on Tuesday. Carlos Santos, the Union County GOP chair, said, quote, "I don't even know the truth myself or even enough to disclose any information, but I've been texting with him and was told he'll be fine and will make a full recovery in the next couple of weeks." A recovery from what? This guy's been missing for a month and we're just finding out about it. And they're just like, yeah, nobody's heard from him. I've texted him. He ain't answering his phone. Like his wife doesn't pick up the phone and be like, hey, he's really sick. We'll get back to you. We'll keep you up to date. Nope. Just silence.
Not to take things off track, but I do want to address a comment that was in the chat because it's one that I heard constantly at GART after talking about elections at GART. People would come up and they would say, okay, well, I understand that you might have a point, but what are your solutions? You're never giving us solutions. This is just all negative. It's like, well, first of all, it's not negative. It is absolutely fundamentally critically important that Americans understand the nature of their relationship with their government and what the nature of that relationship is supposed to be vis-a-vis the Constitution, what the founders thought about that relationship, and what the ones who were arguing for a different relationship thought as well. Those things are all important. It is important for Americans to understand exactly what is wrong with their elections if they intend to fix them. Why would I be offering up solutions to people who cannot accept what the problem is and can't wrap their heads around what the problem is or how the solutions cannot come from the system if they understand what the problem is? Why would I offer up solutions? And why do people ask for solutions? Well, people ask for solutions because they want to change the subject so that they don't have to accept the problem. They'll ask for solutions. Someone will present solutions, and then they'll say, well, that won't work. Here's why. Well, that won't work. Here's why. Well, you know what? We're going to have to win elections to implement that solution. So you better tell everybody to vote again. That's what happens when you present solutions to people who don't know what the problem is. Why would I want to discuss solutions? What should be done about a problem that someone doesn't understand? Why would I be interested in that discussion? That would be a complete and total waste of my time, and it would be a waste of their time because they're not on a solution level. Who would be proposing solutions to problems to people who don't understand that the problem exists? Okay? None of these things make sense. Asking people for solutions is the most childish distraction from the conversation I can possibly imagine, which is why it always comes from people who are monumentally triggered about being told directly things they already know to be true.
The whole being a negative about this is entirely subjective. And if you look at it from a perspective like you're looking at it from, or myself, what Chris is saying to me is a positive, because he's identifying, like you said, you're identifying the problem. To say it's negative because we're not just going to sit around and go along with the system and we're going to point out the inadequacies and the problems in the system. A solution. I mean, what position of power do we have? I mean, we're talking right now to almost 3,000 people, right? We do this every single day. Chris highlights this every single day through his writings, through his podcast. You know, you're saying he's negative. I think Chris is being positive. I think Chris is doing a huge service to this country by pointing out these things. You know, no, I do. I agree with that. Now, I mean, again, I still am of the belief, and we had this discussion at GART, that we got to participate in the system, and we got to.
That's a separate conversation.
Yeah, totally. But pointing it out, that's not a negative. That's like saying, you know, if somebody who's fat is taking a GLP-1 and you're saying, hey, that GLP-1 is going to end up killing you. Why are you being so negative? Well, because I'm just telling you the truth about this. I'm telling you what is going to ultimately happen. We are literally driving ourselves into more and more despotism in the path that we're going through right now. And somebody telling you you're negative for saying that is absurd.
Yeah. Well, you know, the other thing is, oh shit. I just, when you were saying that part at the end, I just totally lost track.
Going more and more towards despotism.
Yeah. Oh man, it'll come back to me.
It's probably one of the greatest intellectual thoughts ever.
I think that it was going to be okay. It was along the lines of here it is. The solution conversation. You know, let's say, for the people who believe that solutions can come legislatively from winning elections, all right? First off, the elections are fake, so you have to figure out how to beat the system at a system that is designed to make sure you can't ever beat it, okay? So you have to figure out how to beat the enemy within their own system. Elections are fake. It's really just a narrative battle anyway. Narrative battles are won by us speaking about things, convincing people of things. That's what wins narrative battles. Elections are ultimately narrative battles. If elections are fake, they are narrative battles. Okay. If elections are real and legitimate, they are still narrative battles. And the winner of the election will be a reflection of whoever won the narrative battle. So that's the only point there. And if we seized political power through a fake election, and then some small faction within the Republican Party convinced the party leaders to somehow push through a new election system, that would be done with the approval of something like 10% of Americans. Okay? Most of the country doesn't understand the problem with our elections. If we implement a solution in that scenario, then we are already violating the will and consent of the American people. Okay. It's a narrative problem that demands a narrative solution. And people need to be honest about what the problem is before solutions are even talked about, because everybody needs to know what the problem is so that we can figure out a solution together and then implement that solution together with a critical mass of people that makes it fortified against the enemy in the first place. So the conversation that is still somehow being had in 2026 is so utterly retarded. And that is a total and complete failure of people to tell the truth and do so in a confident manner that actually emphasizes the patriotism you pretend to express by voting for Republicans.
Spot on. I mean, that's why I do this every single morning, because I think the first place that we have to win the narrative war is in the media. And the more
100%.
and more people that watch, shows like Badlands, the more people that are exposed to, ideas like Chris's idea, the evidence that we uncover, the evidence that we disclose, and that we talk about, the ideas of how corrupt this system actually is, the more people that add on to this, the more people wake up to see what this government has actually become, and the more likely we are to be able to take it back, or just shut the whole thing down. And again, this is something that's not really popular, but John asked every single person, why do we even pay our taxes?
Yeah.
And it's a legitimate question that needs answering. So
yeah, at some point, the people who are so in love with the system that they will do whatever it tells them all the time, and they will submit their power to the government for absolutely nothing, have to accept the fact that they are not freedom fighters. They are just addicted to internet television.
Gossip.
That's it. Okay.
Gossip.
Yeah. It's gossip about fake news, things that you don't even know are true. People are just gossiping about them all day, pretending to save the country by being digital soldiers. It is such a shame and embarrassment.
Me and Alpha last week on SitRep, we took a political ideology test, because Alpha thought he was authoritarian, and he actually ended up two little spots up on libertarian, which was actually kind of surprising. But one of the questions, and I tried to find this the other day and I couldn't find it, and I'm going to butcher how it's phrased, but it was something along the lines of, are you okay with your media, meaning your news, being lumped in with entertainment? And that, to me, when I read that, I was like, holy shit, this is what it is. The old phrase, if it bleeds, it leads. It's kind of the same thing. If it's divisive, put it to the top, right? Because it is going to create this divide between us. And keep people on the other side. And I've said this many times. If you guys talk, if you go out and talk to somebody, they have no preconceived perception of your political ideologies, your beliefs, or anything like that, and you leave out Republican, Democrat, Trump, AOC, Schumer, leave out all of the names of these people that rule over us, and just talk about issues, especially issues around our government, you'll find out there is so much in common between the left and the right on this, especially the far left and the far right. And when I say far right, I'm using that as a fake term because they label us far right, right? And they'll label, somebody like, I can't think of somebody off the top of my head, like Cenk Uyghur, right? The Young Turks, right? They'll put them far and left. But again, in just a heads up conversation, there's probably a lot of in common in terms of the administration of our government. So.
Well, yeah, people who
it was a horrible example, I realize.
Whatever. Cenk's kind of in the middle, and he's probably some kind of info op anyway. But Americans are understanding that something is grievously wrong with the system, and it cannot be solved by replacing one party with the other party and then back again. And there's nothing dooming or blackpilling about that. Okay, it is dooming and blackpilling to keep cheerleading and pumping the idea that we should remain locked in this system forever, because people are so mentally brain broken that, and it just is Stockholm syndrome on a massive scale. We have been conditioned throughout our entire lives to believe that the state is our God, and it is sad to see people in 2026 unable to let go of that.
Yep. Spot on. All right, let's move on. We'll get back to actual news and not just incredible, thoughtful, philosophical insight from Chris Paul. That it's unfortunate we still have to talk about these things because we talk about them a lot, and the more people that get exposed to that type of logic and thought process and critical thinking, the more likely we are to eventually take back the system. So, all right, Fox News here. NASA nuclear engineer found dead in burned Tesla after vanishing from his Alabama home last year. Now, this is interesting because this is an old story. This story is from last year, July of 2025, the whole story, but it just now becomes relevant with this missing scientist, thing that's going around here. Joshua LeBlanc died in a fiery crash in his Tesla on July 22nd, 2025 in Huntsville, Alabama. His Tesla was found burned beyond recognition at 2:45 in the afternoon According to Alabama law enforcement, the vehicle collided with a guardrail and then several trees before the vehicle burst into flames. I find that hard to believe. A Tesla crashing into a guardrail and then several trees. Those things are pretty damn good at stopping you from doing really dumb shit with your car. But
maybe the car became suicidal based on the garbage in problem of artificial intelligence.
Or because this guy worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab in NASA. And there seems to be a target on a lot of these people. It says at 4:32 a.m. on the same day, LeBlanc's family reported him missing. He uncharacteristically failed to show up to his job as an aerospace technologies electrical engineer at NASA, where he worked on nuclear propulsion projects. Now, I want to pause there for a second because it says at 2:45 in the afternoon, he crashed the car. Okay, so that's 2:45 p.m. Then it says in the next paragraph at 4:32 a.m. on the same day. So did they report him missing before he crashed the car, or are they just kind of conflating 4:32 a.m. with technically the same? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, so
did he crash at 2:45 p.m. and then 12 hours later, 14 hours later at 4:32 a.m. they're like, hey, he's missing? Or did they report him missing at 4:32 a.m. and then he ends up crashing like 12 hours later?
So the way I'm reading that sentence, and it's a little awkward. The crash happened in Huntsville, Alabama, where his Tesla was found burned beyond recognition at about 2:45 in the afternoon. Okay. So I think it's the finding of the Tesla was at 2:45.
Okay, so that's not when the crash happened.
That's how I'm reading it.
Okay. Either way, that's that was kind of weird for me, but that's not the weirdest thing in this. Let's keep going. At the time, his family told KLFY that they feared he had been abducted, and he left his phone and wallet in his home at the time of his disappearance. That is so I've written about these. I wrote about these in early April before all the mainstream, the New York Post, Fox News, and everybody else picked up on these stories. Other people had picked up on it already. I'm not saying like this is like, unique or whatever, but a lot of these people have the same exact thing. They all leave behind their wallet, their phone, like they were just taken abruptly, brought somewhere and either disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. This is another case of the same thing. They fear he was abducted because he left his phone and his wallet at home. Nobody leaves both of those things behind nowadays. I'll forget one or the other, but like I'll get in my car and I'll be like, shit, I forgot my wallet. Oh, I got my phone. I got Apple Pay or, whatever's on my phone. Or I'll be like, I forgot my phone. I'll be like, oh, it'd be nice not to have that thing for a little bit. And I got my wallet so I can pay with a credit card if I need to, right? But I would never go out without both. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
With you.
Police tracked LeBlanc down using the data from his Tesla Sentry mode and found that his vehicle sat at the airport in Huntsville for 4 hours on the morning of his death. I've been to that airport. Very small. It's a nice airport, actually. His family said his trip west was not part of his plan for the day and that uncharacteristically he was not communicating with them. This fucking reeks, dude.
Yeah.
This definitely reeks. He was the team lead at NASA's Space Nuclear Propulsion Instrumentation and Control Maturation. That's a mouthful. Like, how do you tell that like to somebody when you're going on a date and they're like, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm the team lead at NASA's Space Propulsion Instrumentation and Control Maturation project. I mean, that's impressive of its own.
Yeah.
Probably gonna get laid that night, dude. S&P technology, quote, would enable faster and more robust transportation for crew and cargo missions to Mars and science missions to the outer solar system. And then it goes on to talk about the other 11 scientists. So again, they're still piecing together these people. And the crazy thing is, Chris, is they're coming to attention now, but most of these happen around that exact time, July of 2025. One of them was July 4th. A couple of them were in, the early summer, late spring of 2025. And so, Trump's aware of this. Don't know, if we're ever going to figure it out, if this will be classified at a high level, but very interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be annoying. The fact that Fox News is so all in on this story makes me feel pretty strange about it. The fact that Tucker Carlson, even when he was on Fox News, was talking about the aliens and demons thing back then, and that now they're all pushing that again at the same time. There's something very, very weird about all of this. And I understand that people don't like thinking about these things, story ahead of actual event, especially when there is some trauma or tragedy involved with what we are told is the actual event. But at the end of the day, you can see coordinated messaging campaigns pushing this stuff out. You can see the narrative seeding that led up to it. You can see the announcements of these situations by the same characters and outlets. There's something more going on there. And it's not to make light of the tragedy or ignore the tragedy. It is to say that these are still functions of the same system and must be analyzed that way rather than as strange occurrences in the world, you know?
So I would push back on the Fox aspect just a little bit, because this kind of sparked up organically, and well, as far as we know, again, and we don't know the people behind these accounts, but this came up from a relatively small account on X, and I was put onto it by Josh Reed. Shared it and was like, and because, you know, he has all sorts of crazy stuff that he finds on X and is reposting it. And I was like, this is interesting. So I started digging into it. And then Representative Burchett reposts it and says, keep digging on it. And this was back in the end of March. And so, you know, I put out the article on, I think it was like April 2nd. I put out an article on this after digging into it and confirming everything through local reporting and stuff like that. And then mid-April is when New York Post, Fox News, and everybody else started getting onto it. And then Trump, you know, is privy to it and, you know, puts this out. And so, you know, I don't know if this was necessarily, if this is necessarily an info op by the Mockingbird media, or if they're just kind of jumping onto it now because there was so much noise around it that they had to address it in some form or fashion.
It could be that. I know that Burchett is out there a lot talking about that stuff, and maybe that's good. And I don't mean to cast aspersions on the man. I just am not sure if he can prove his legitimacy in office. And so the fact that he comes out blazing on War Room and then changes his look and then talks about aliens in Congress, in a Congress that isn't doing anything, where he is not talking incessantly about fake elections, it's like his opinion means nothing to me.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think he's a pretty good, he's been, I mean, he has a perception of this down to earth, like he's one of us, right? He owned a skateboarding brand. He, you know, he does all the cool things, the hip things. You know, he gets his ass kicked by a horse on his farm. You know, he seems like a down to earth guy, and he's the one out here saying all these totally based things like aliens are you know, something we definitely need to be looking into. I've seen the information. I've seen the hybrid alien human experimentation, and Trump needs to put this out. He's alluding to the scientists. Like, I get it. It could be a massive op. But also at the same time, we have to entertain the idea that it's not. We have to entertain it because it's absolutely a possibility. Everything's a possibility in this regard. So yeah,
100% on what you just said about that. You always leave that possibility open. I'm just saying that the pattern in media activity and algorithmic manipulation to push certain stories to the surface is not a factor of the world that can be ignored in any situation at this point, because we know that is what generates the virality. It's what generates the illusion of public consensus, even if that consensus only points to a high level of public interest. These are factors that are far more important than the minute details of, you know, situations like the one we just read about with NASA man.
Fair. All right. So let's, speaking of PSYOPs and the whatnot, Brian Cole Jr., let's talk a little J6 pipe bomber, because that's getting pretty heated. So he had a hearing, I think it was yesterday, right? Maybe 2 days ago. And again, this is federal court, so we can't watch it. So the only way that we can have any idea what's going on in our justice system is to actually be there in person to see them trying to persecute this kid, this guy. He's not a kid, but mentally he's a kid. But Cara Castronovo with Lindell TV was there and has this clip here kind of outline what took place. And I think it's worth watching this thing. They tried to, they issued a superseding indictment. They've added 4 counts now, including a terrorism enhancer. So, and weapons of mass destruction, because the fake pipe bombs that totally were not.
So wait a second. Fake pipe bombs are now on par with yellow cake uranium and nuclear weapons and biological weapons. Cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the term weapons of mass destruction is gravely skewed because of the whole Bush thing, because everybody going around saying WMDs for 10 years at the beginning of that war made us think that WMDs automatically meant like nerve gas agents and nuclear weapons and biological weapons that could kill millions and millions of people. In reality, WMD, weapons of mass destruction, in a legal term, has a very distinct definition, and I think it's like a device that could cause harm to X amount of people, you know, and so a pipe bomb does actually fit that definition, but it's also semantics, right? It's a word that you look at and you're like, holy shit, this guy could have blown up the entirety of Washington DC with this little pipe bomb. That was fake.
Yes, and all good on the definitional use of weapons of mass destruction. But we were sold in a mass media marketing campaign the idea that weapons of mass destruction were just cause to go to war for 20 years on the other side of the globe. So, and by the way, on a smaller scale, they're using it for the same reason here. They're attempting to over dramatize what happened to make us engage fully in the threat, be scared, and then allow them to implement whatever solution they propose to that threat.
Yes. And so they add these superseding indictments to Cole Jr. And, you know, they mentioned that this potentially has a life sentence because of these enhancements and these additions. And all of this is in an effort, in my opinion, to get him to plea, because they want this closed up, right? We also see on the other spectrum of this, you know, narrative here, this deployment, we see you got Brian Cole Jr. on one side and you got the CIA officer, former Capitol Police officer on the other side. And again, if you ask me, I think there's a hell of a lot more evidence that it was the former Capitol Police officer was involved in this than there is Brian Cole. By far. It's not even close to me. That being said, somebody is rolling something out here that they want Brian Cole to be the patsy for this. They want him to be the fall guy for this, and they don't want it to go to trial. They want this to be a plea deal. Let's throw life sentences at this kid and see if we can scare him. And Chris, let me ask you, man, if the federal government, which has like a 99.6% conviction rate, it's something high like that, it has a conviction rate when they go to trial, are you going to trial, or are you going to take a plea deal when your life is on the line potentially?
I guess it depends on what I'm being accused of.
Well, you have to take into account that you're highly autistic and antisocial and live in your basement and play with little ponies.
Well,
no, he does. The kid, this Brian Cole, he has an account on My Little Ponies or something.
Does. I thought you were talking about me for a second.
Oh, no.
That is not something I do. I mean, it's funny.
You probably won't last long in federal prison if you're a pony bro. I think that's what they're called, like pony bros or something. Like this is like a whole underground cult of beta males. But my point is like the threat of your life against a plea deal, and we don't know what the plea deal is, I don't think. But you know, are you going to give up 2 years of your life and walk away, or are you going to roll the dice against bronies? That's what they're called, bronies. Or are you going to roll the dice against the giant of a system that has endless funds and endless resources and has a history of you know, holding these people like Oswald, James Earl Ray, like all of these people? Are you going to run that risk? You know, like for the rest of your life, you're going to walk around and wonder, is Jack Ruby behind you? You know, it's interesting, man.
Yeah. So I mean, I suppose he'll do whatever is scripted.
Well, I guess it's scripted that he's gonna push through, because check this out.
Other things.
Hold on, do I have it sped up? Because
that happened during that arraignment that stood out to me was a real mic drop from the from the defense when they literally just walked right up to the judge and said, we want to set a trial date. I think that really surprised the prosecution. Their mouths sort of fell open. A lot of the FBI agents and the DOJ that were sitting there watching sort of looked at each other in disbelief when the defense said, we want to get a trial date on the docket. I don't think that they expected that. I think that they added all of these new charges, sort of hoping that this young man, Brian Cole Jr., would would be scared and plea out. I don't think they expected that at all. And
now, I mean, that's the same tactics they used during J6. You know, they went after these people that were just, you know, walking through the Capitol peacefully and whatever. And they said, hey, if you take our plea deal, we'll give you 6 months probation. You can stay at home. You can relax, lounge back. It'll be a misdemeanor conviction. You're not going to be a felon. But if you try and fight this, we're going to throw the book at you and you could end up 10, 15 years in prison. What's it going to be? And by the way, to fight it, it's going to cost you at least $250,000. What's it going to be? And they're like, we'll take the plea deal. This happened to hundreds of J6ers. And so now that somebody is pushing back against the system, mad props to Brian Cole Jr. and his legal team for pushing back against this and standing up for it. But yeah, let's go, man.
Yeah, that's a lot of leverage that the government is able to exercise against the people to enforce laws that the government wrote in an anti-constitutional manner that are supported by court precedent and literally nothing else. It really is incredible. I hope, just to put a tag on the end of this, I hope that all of these issues, whether they are just psyops and stories for us to understand how our system is changing or how the government is changing, which they might be, but that they actually go through the process so that we can see how thoroughly anti-constitutional all of this actually is. It is ridiculous that a federal government that was set up to basically draw the states together to protect the territory of the country in times of grave threat and manage interstate commerce is now in total control of every aspect of our lives.
Maybe we should have like a discussion about were the Articles of Confederation better than the Constitution?
Well, I think there's very little question about that. And I think that one of the most interesting things about the supposedly legitimate ratification of the Constitution is that to change the Articles of Confederation, all 13 states that were part of the Articles had to ratify the changes. And they had a convention in order to make some changes and have the states ratify them. At that convention, they decided they were going to scrap the Articles of Confederation without 13 states agreeing, and then ratified the new Constitution with only 9 of the 13. So, you know, and maybe the Constitution is the greatest compromise of all time, but it is a compromise, and people should understand that. And it is a compromise in the direction of the problem that we now face. And so if you're talking about directionality, a move in that direction suggests further movement in that direction. And 237 years on, we have seen the country move entirely in that direction. And that is the problem we are attempting to solve. So looking back to the mistakes of that era in that compromise makes absolute sense.
That's one of the biggest pushbacks I always have when we have the discussion about the Article 5 Convention of States movement, because I broadly agree with it. But however, I always go back to the 1783 convention and I look at that and I say, well, that was essentially a convention of states, right? They sent delegations down to Pennsylvania. They all got together. They were supposed to amend the Articles of Confederation into something that was a little more favorable. And they said, fuck it, we're just going to scrap the whole thing and make a whole new document. And once we convene a convention of states, there's nothing that could stop them from doing that. Yep. There's nothing. And so, I mean, we could put guardrails on and we can say, don't you do this. You're only going in there to pass them. You're only going in there to pass a balanced budget. You're only going in there to, to put term limits. And sure, that sounds great. And they might not go as far as like completely wiping the Constitution in a new document. But they could go in there and say like, hey, let's define the Second Amendment. Let's define the First Amendment. Let's make sure that you can't own assault rifles, as they call them, assault rifles. Let's make sure we put that in there, or that you can only own firearms at, whatever, or the First Amendment. Make sure you can't say anything anti-Semitic as defined by the IHRA. And we'll talk about that in a minute here. But yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And you're 100% right about what you just said. You don't want to give your power away to a process when you don't know what the outcome of that process is going to be. And I would suggest
limitless power.
Yeah, and I would suggest that that's what we do in our elections every time. Maybe now's a good time to look at that Trump post from this morning, by the way.
Sure. Can we hit a sponsor real quick?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
'Cause I was looking for a natural break there, but I
perfect.
couldn't find one. So let's go ahead and hit another sponsor, and then we'll get into this post from Trump. I saw you said that earlier, and I thought you were talking about I thought you were talking about the rigged election one, so I didn't see this. All right, guys, they can cancel your accounts, they can freeze your cards, they can decide what you're allowed to buy, say, or support. Big banks and financial institutions have total control, and they use it. That's why financial independence matters now more than ever. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a wallet built for real freedom. With Rumble Wallet, you control your money, not a bank, not a government, not a tech company. You can buy digital assets like Tether Gold, and Bitcoin in one secure place. No permission, no middlemen, no cancel button. And when you want to support the creators that you actually believe in, you can use the Rumble Wallet app to directly tip content creators securely, instantly, and without interference. This isn't a credit line that they can shut off. It's your wallet permanently. Yours to protect your future, yours to protect your family. When the system fails and when institutions turn on their own people, financial sovereignty is the difference between security and vulnerability. Rumble Wallet isn't about politics. It's about freedom, ownership, and protecting what's yours. So take control today. Download the Rumble Wallet now and step away from the big banks for good. True ownership, true protection, true financial freedom. All right. Pull it up.
You got it right there. Yeah. So he said the Southern Poverty Law Center, one of the greatest political scams in American history, has been charged with fraud. This is another Democrat hoax. Important to remember he said that, along with Act Blue and many others. If it is true, the 2020 presidential election should be permanently wiped from the books and be of no further force or effect. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, an update that the AutoPen story is no longer going to get the job done. We're going to have to get to another deeper level of disclosure. He is speaking my language here. I also did spend 4 years on my podcast saying Joe Biden is not president and Joe Biden will never be president because he never was president. Now Trump is once again telling you, hey, Joe Biden was never president and the history books will not record Joe Biden as president. So what does it mean that people spent 4 years calling Joe Biden president and voting? And why are smart people who claim to have woken up still listening to those people when they do their mainstream internet TV shows on Twitter?
I love it. The AutoPen was the soft disclosure.
Yeah. And this is also soft disclosure, by the way. This is a deeper level of disclosure, but this still ain't the bottom level. And so he is taking it to the next step. And the SPLC story is super viral this week. I'm not sure why, but the Trump loading this on to the SPLC thing is the same as him loading this on to the SAVE Act. He's saying, oh, okay, you're going to say you're going to fix the system. Well, hey, there's this other part of the system that you don't really talk about fixing. And why don't we fix that at the same time? He is forcing this into a narrative where it was not meant to be. And this sort of thing indicates movement in the future. I love when Trump does this stuff.
Can I play? Because I'm going to make a bold prediction right here. I'm calling an audible, and I'm going to play my own clip here. But SPLC is not even the worst of the worst, especially in regards of the rigged election. Act Blue is obviously the funding apparatus, but I want you guys to check out this clip. This is a podcast, an interview that I did back in, this is probably around 2022 that I did this interview.
They had 255 ACLU clerks with personal access on their laptop, and no telling who else had access.
Oh, what the hell? When you were in your precinct, they showed up, did they identify themselves as members of the ACLU?
Well, no, she just told me she was my absentee clerk, and I said, oh, are you with the ACLU? And she's like, yes. And she told me she was trained the day before. She did a Zoom training. I had a laptop for her to use, but they didn't give me the password to the laptop. So she's like, oh, that's okay. I'll just pull it up on my personal computer. So she used her personal computer and she had access to the entire eNet system and can clear any voter she wanted to vote.
Wait, what can you explain a little bit more, like what she was able to do with that type of access?
So if a voter came in and it said that they had an absentee ballot, you would have to tell them, hey, you have an absentee ballot. Did you bring it with you? And 9 times out of 10, they don't bring the absentee ballot with them. So then we used to have to call downtown to verify that they haven't already turned in an absentee ballot. And if they say no, then we can clear out the coding and let them vote on election day on the BMDs. So the absentee clerks, that's essentially what they're doing. Instead of us calling downtown, they could remove that somebody hasn't used their absentee ballot. They could clear them so they could vote on the machine.
How often does this occur? That somebody comes in, says I voted, and you actually have to go through that process?
It happened a lot because everybody in the state of Georgia got absentee ballot applications sent to them because of COVID. So tons of people filled them out, but then really didn't have any intention of ever using them. And so a lot of people were all coded that they had an absentee ballot.
So the software again that the ACL. All right, we can kind of land that there. But that was an interview that I did back in like 2022, 2023, somewhere around there. And the ACLU had a clerk in every precinct in Fulton County. Now that's just talking about Fulton County there. I don't know how much, beyond that it goes. But there is never a situation where a non-governmental organization should have the type of access on their personal computer, meaning they can not only access it while they're there in the precinct, they can access it at home. Oh, crap. They can access it while they're at home and do whatever they want with this system. So I think the SPLC is only the tip of the spear on this, and President Trump now using SPLC with the election and rigging the election is interesting to me. I'm going to make a prediction here, man. I think we're going to see the ACLU come under scrutiny in a couple weeks, month or two.
I'm down for that. Your Twitter machine might be able to find quickly a Mark Andreessen post. I think it was from today or yesterday.
He blocked me.
No way.
I just found out today he blocked me. I tried to look at a post.
What did you do to him?
I don't know. I don't even really know who he is.
That's really funny. So Mark Andreessen he is like a real life conehead, and he is like the kind of Peter Thiel on the uniparty left.
Yeah, see, he blocked me.
So strange. Why can you see his posts then?
Because X made it so you can still see posts.
Oh, okay. So can you? Well, there's one that he was going down, like Elon Musk had reposted. He was going down a list of other entities like the SPLC that could be involved in similar activity. It gives you like every one of his posts.
Yeah,
so you can still see all of his stuff. You just can't communicate with him or tag him. Very interesting.
I think this is the post you're talking about right here. Grok, is that if there are staff at other activist group, at companies, or at government agencies that knew about and or coordinated with SPLC, what are the additional criminal charges?
This actually is not the post, but it's probably grouped together with very similar posts about the subject. I would keep, there you go. Well, no, even for the government agencies. It was, he just mentioned some of the other activist groups on the left and was framing them as kind of, what they are is pass-throughs for agenda related stuff that cannot be done by the government itself.
Here it is. Here it is.
Go ahead.
This is the one you're talking about, because this is the one I was going to comment on. Do various censorship, debanking pressure groups, SPLC and others coordinate their work? If one of them is breaking the law, are they all breaking the law? Are there grounds for criminal conspiracy charges, RICO charges, including complicit donor? Is that it?
Yeah, that sounds like it. Close enough to my memory. And then I don't know, man. He was asking Grok to list organizations, and they would list a couple, and then he would be like, well, what about some more? Anyway, I don't know.
But yeah, he goes on, Grok goes on to say like ADL is up there. Media Matters is up there. I know exactly which one, because I was looking at that same post this morning, Chris, when I realized that Mark Andreessen blocked me, and I was like, what the let me see if I can find it real quick. Bear with us for 2 seconds, guys, because it is a worthy post to pull up here. I think this might be it. Yeah, here it is. So, Grok, we all just discovered SPLC has allegedly been funding some of the worst people and groups it claims to oppose. What are other activist pressure groups that advocate censorship, deplatforming of their enemies that could be doing the same thing? Grok responds, groups like the ADL, which tracks quote-unquote hate and pushes deplatforming while accused of overreach on critics, Media Matters, which drives ad boycotts against conservative speech, and CCDH, Center for, what is that, Censorship and Hate? What's the CCDC? DH? Center for, it's the Center.
I'll find out real quick.
I know what it is, but it reports targeting platforms for censorship, operate on similar models, identifying enemies to fuel donations and advocacy. No proven SPLC style fraud yet, but their incentives mirror the risk exposed here. Perpetual threats keep the funding flowing. Transparency audits would help everywhere.
The Center for Countering Digital Hate.
Digital hate, that's what it was. Yeah, that was
digital hate. What a concept that is. It's digital hate.
So stupid. Let me see if I can find
an abstract abstraction. It's incredible.
Check out this post here. We're going off on a little tangent here, but where is it? Here it is. Andrew Kerr posted this. Breaking, IRS announces plans to revive nonprofit Form 990 filings to require disclosure of fiscal sponsorships. This is a big deal. Liberal dark money networks, including Tides and Arabella, have for decades exploited fiscal sponsorship to effectively operate in the shadows. And this is something, I mean, because I immediately went and started looking through SPLC funding and all this when this dropped, and it's impossible to track it down. They're tax exempt entities, and they have zero accountability to the people. Like they operate free of their debt to society through their taxing, and they get to hide their donors. It's absolutely insane.
And they just use the phrase fiscal sponsorships, right? So those are tax organizations that are set up for these companies. And I don't know if you remember in 2020, we talked a lot about 1,000 Currents, which was the fiscal sponsor umbrella group for Black Lives Matter. And on the board of 1,000 Currents was a woman named Susan Rosenberg, who was literally part of the May 19th communist organization that bombed the Capitol. And we were told after January 6th that the grandmas walking through it were the greatest attack on the Capitol since the War of 1812, I think it was.
We've got marching orders now, Chris, from all of these leftists, and I'm just picking out Doug Jones, who's running for something in Alabama. What's he running for? Governor. He's running for governor in Alabama. He says charging the SPLC with a federal crime for paying informants to help dismantle hate groups is an outrageous weaponization of the DOJ and the FBI. As someone who has been a prosecutor and has taken on the Klan, I can tell you that the use of paid informants is a common tactic used to dismantle drug cartels, the mob, and extremist groups on both the right and the left. It is clear that civil rights organizations are in the crosshairs of this administration, and that folks put everyone at risk. Here's the difference. When you were a prosecutor and you were doing it, those informants were the FBI. They were law enforcement. They were sworn officers. Now, granted, I don't think that that's right either. I'm avidly against that because that's been weaponized to the fullest. Hashtag Gretchen Whitmer, right? So I don't agree with that. However, Doug Jones is now at the point, in the public-private partnership that Ash and I talk about all the time on Why We Vote, he is now at the point of justifying an NGO using law enforcement tactics to implant somebody, an informant, to dismantle a group. First and foremost, they don't have the authority to dismantle any group. They're an NGO just like the NGO that they're trying to dismantle, whether you agree with them or not. And obviously I don't tend to agree with them, but they're manufacturing all of this. They're not a law enforcement branch. They don't have that right and that authority. And making any comparison between the SPLC embedding informants and the FBI embedding informants is retarded, but also neither entity should be putting informants into organizations.
Definitely. And you mentioned Gretchen Whitmer. Isn't Jocelyn Benson, wasn't she like on the
SPLC board? Yep.
Yeah, on the board of SPLC when they were helping to organize the Charlottesville event. Yep. I mean, remember what that Charlottesville event was and how dramatic all of that was, that they skewed Trump's comments about very fine people on both sides. But even beyond that, they used the kind of recall about their protester dying at the event and the men with the tiki torches. And they used that extensively for years to brand Trump and his supporters. And they did it so thoroughly and so well that a lot of that still carries over. There are like normal, I mean, normal is like in quotes, like Democrat boomers who still believe all that stuff and still look at MAGA that way on that basis, because they always have a new one of these stories to gin up. Well, the way they get all these new stories all the time is they create them themselves. And we are getting told a story about how the system and its various arms create realities that we perceive as real in order to tell certain stories about us, in order to exploit us and take our power from us, which is the case I've been making for years while people tell me I can't call everything fake. It's honestly so silly at this point.
I feel like we should probably move on from this conversation, because I feel like I'm foreshadowing. We're foreshadowing tomorrow night's DPH, so we'll save it for there, because I'm sure this is going to be a major topic tomorrow night.
Could be.
All right, let's get back to the Brian Cole saga.
It showed on their faces. So that was another huge moment there when that attorney for Brian Cole Jr. went up to the judge and asked for a trial date to be put on the docket. Another thing that stood out to me was the judge flipping out on the defense attorneys. Judge Ali, this happens often in January 6 cases when it's almost like the judge is part of the prosecution team, literally just started yelling. He went from 0 to 10 out of nowhere on the defense. No one really understood why. He just got angry at something they said and just started reprimanding them, embarrassing them, and yelling at them in court, when, in my opinion, they're just trying to defend their client, who was literally up against the federal government that wants to put him in jail for the rest of his life. And he was yelled at very nastily, to say the least, by Judge Ali. So that was another moment that stood out to me. Something else also that stood out was the defense is asking to subpoena Congress. They want to subpoena congressional records.
This part's big. This part's big right here.
Meaning January 6 committee records, any hearings or information that Congress has on the alleged pipe bomber. Again, I think that surprised the prosecution. I don't think that's something that anybody in the government really wants to come out. They're nervous about that. Obviously, a lot of unresolved things about January 6th. People are still asking so many questions. And the alleged pipe bomber, Brian Cole Jr.'s defense, is asking to subpoena Congress. And that's one of the reasons they are asking for a trial date, because you cannot really subpoena Congress without having a trial date on the docket. Another thing that stood out to me is that the defense is possibly going with what they're calling a, quote, alternate perpetrator defense. So that was something that was brought up towards the end of the hearing. And I am making the assumption that that alternate perpetrator would be the Capitol Police officer that some publications have alleged could be the actual pipe bomber, that it's not Brian Cole Jr. So the defense is actually going to go possibly, or at least bring up a quote unquote alternate perpetrators, something.
All right. And they go on to mention that she failed the polygraph, where they asked if she was a J6 affiliated with the J6, or if she planted the bombs herself. But the Congress thing is interesting, subpoenaing the records from Congress, because that's been widely kept from the people.
Mm-hmm.
The J6 committee has been widely kept from the people. And now if you're going to try and put a man away for life, he has access. He gets access, right? The right to a complete defense.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'll get access to that information and what they know about it, what they've, discussions they've had and all that. And so this could actually end up being beneficial. This could end up being, an expose of the J6 pipe bomb story. So interesting. I'm trying to, I did not plan on going we're going a lot slower than I thought, so I'm going to breeze through some stories here. Let's jump into this one just briefly. CNBC, Microsoft plans first ever voluntary employee buyout for up to 7% of their workforce. This would affect their senior director level and below who have more than 70 years of employment when you add up their age and the amount of time they've been there. So if you're 50 and you've been there for 20 years, you can retire. You can take the buyout. All of this is being done because they're ramping up their capital spending on data centers to supply cloud clients with computing power that can handle generative AI models, just like everybody else out there. We are like literally barreling to the point where AI is going to replace us. A lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us.
I mean, maybe. Or maybe that's overstated, and we are watching liquidity, or maybe not even necessarily liquidity. We're watching value be drained out of a number of companies, siphoned into the artificial intelligence data center bubble that will then ultimately be flushed because we don't need that. So we'll see what happens.
All right.
I'm not totally on board the idea that this future is set in stone. The one that is being described here with the massive, overwhelming need for data centers, some of the energy stuff that General Quast talks about, and some of the peer-to-peer data storage capabilities that General Quast talks about, seem to me to obviate some of the need, at least for the data centers. And so I think a lot of these data centers are potentially being built for something else. And I've talked about many times, potentially it being about Bitcoin mining, especially this week when we start to hear comments of a soft war variety coming out from military members in congressional hearings. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I still think we're going to end up moving in that direction, but the power.
You might be totally right. And I understand that you might be totally right.
I would like to know how we can stop that. That's my takeaway. Like, can I get that magic wand? Maybe, you know what? Maybe we'll do like the Ready Player One, and I can just like put on the Matrix goggle and go back to like 1796 and just live back then.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When we were, again, summer of 2020, they were pushing hard on the idea that the metaverse was about to open. And that we could get in these goggles and live a completely separate, different life. And none of that stuff has really played out. And maybe it will in the future. I don't know. I'm not like saying I know what's going to happen. I'm just saying that a lot of the time there's these like conceptual bubbles. There's fear baked in. There's like mysterious technology that we are told is going to do things that previously only God could do. And these things do sound really scary because they sound like they're real in our world, and they just never quite materialize in that way. So I just always think it's important to keep this stuff at arm's length.
Fair enough. Fair enough. The Oculus is pretty interesting in terms of what you can do. I went to the old buildings and pyramids and stuff like that with it, and was able to walk around and all that. It's kind of cool. But yeah, I'm with you. We're not there yet, but we're rapidly moving in that direction, in my opinion. And yeah. New York Post here. East Villagers sue Mamdani to stop relocation of notorious Bellevue men's homeless shelter into their neighborhood. It's so funny. A district that voted overwhelmingly for Mamdani is now suing him to stop from putting up a men's only single men's homeless shelter in right smack dab in the middle of their neighborhood. And they're like, no. We meant when we said we want you to, go after the elite and all that. We meant like not us. We meant like the really, really, really elite, not the, and I'm not saying East Village is like elite, but it is a middle upper class neighborhood from what I understand.
It used to not be. It used to be really bad 20 or 25 years ago. And then it was kind of like gentrifying Hipsterville. And then eventually that thing becomes really expensive and high value. And I mean, it's in a nice location in Manhattan. Of course it would be. And yes, your point is well taken. That is exactly like what people like. I've known so many of those people, and I guess I used to be one of those people. But that is exactly the sort of politics that they engage in. They want the state to solve their problems, just not in a way that affects them.
Right. We want you to solve it. Just solve it over there. Don't solve it over here. You're creating this homeless crisis, this homelessness crisis. But you know what? We're going to fix it by I don't know, sending them into the north end, like Fifth Ave. I have no idea what their goal is. But Mamdani also had this story. I saw Ghost posted this, so I'm just sharing this briefly. Mamdani administration won't use a codified anti-Semitism definition. Good for him. The head of New York City, Mayor Zohran Mamdani's anti-Semitism office. That's crazy that they have an anti-Semitism office. That's a real thing. On Wednesday, said that the city hall will not replace a widely used anti-Semitism definition that Mamdani scrapped on his first day in office. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism equates some forms of anti-Israel rhetoric with discrimination against Jews. This is coming from the Times of Israel, by the way. Eric Adams adopted the definition for the city government last year by executive order. Bonkers. Never heard of the First Amendment, I guess. Mamdani revoked the order, sparking questions about how City Hall would recognize anti-Jewish discrimination. Discrimination against Jews is often not clear-cut and is sometimes associated with Israel or quote-unquote Zionism, and political rhetoric against Israel is protected speech, even though Jews often experience anti-Zionist activity as discrimination. Mamdani has shown himself ready to condemn quote-unquote classic forms of anti-Semitism, such as swastikas or tropes about Jewish greed, but unwilling to label anti-Zionist activities as discriminatory.
That's really something, man. So they experience anti-Zionism as discrimination. They experience it as discrimination. It might not be discrimination, but that is how they have been conditioned to experience it. So they do experience it that way at a high enough degree that they can plausibly tell the world anti-Zionism is anti-Jewish discrimination when it is not. Those are definitionally different things. There are anti-Zionist Jews, a lot of them. And anti-Zionist Jews actually think and believe that Zionism is itself a refutation of Judaism, that Judaism doesn't allow for Zionism. That is Jews that think that. Yep. So that part of it is absolutely nuts. And I also just want to call attention to how weird it is that a mayor of a city signed an executive order to define a word that describes an emotion. That is utterly insane. That is like so many levels deep in a false reality. And again, because we're statists and we think that the government's allowed to do whatever it wants, we take that seriously. He signed an executive order using the power of his office to define a word that describes a feeling.
And not only that, throughout the country, in our federal government, they try and use a nonprofit that has literal ties to an event that happened 100 years ago, reportedly, 80 years ago, reportedly, and use their definitions as what it means to talk about the religion that they in most part represent. That's the craziest part to me. Like an NGO dictating terms, what free speech actually means to Americans, to me, is absolutely crazy. Unbelievable. Let's hit another sponsor here, and then we'll get into, I got two stories we have to talk about, and then we might be able to take a phone call. And I can do both stories relatively quick. But let's go ahead and hit that final sponsor of the show. And guys, have you still not tried 1775 coffee? Now is your chance. The 1775 starter kit just dropped with only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits hard, the smooth medium roast, and the Vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus with no crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin free, and mold free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom is not scooped with plastic, a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your father-in-law's political opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler, $170 worth of coffee and gear for just $99. This is for the ones who've been watching it blow up on watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it is. Visit 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. All right, let's go ahead and jump into these last two stories real quick. Donald Trump has negotiated a 3-week extension on the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire. Says the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and Ambassador to Lebanon, Michael Issa, met today with high-ranking representatives of Israel and Lebanon in the Oval Office. The meeting went very well. The United States is going to work with Lebanon in order to help it protect itself from Hezbollah. The ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon will be extended by 3 weeks. I look forward in the near future to hosting the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, and the President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun. It was a great honor to be a participant at this very historic meeting. Donald J. Trump. Then there's a video he posted on rapid response of the ambassador from Lebanon in the Oval Office, which was excellent. And then Trump had a remark about Israel defending itself. And I think he gives a little bit of a veiled, I don't want to say threat, but kind of a veiled warning here. If you check this out.
Israel has to, I mean, we're just talking about it. Israel is going to have to defend itself if they're shot at, and they will. I would never say that they can't. It would be nice if they wouldn't have to bother with that. But if something happens, they're going to have to defend themselves, as you know. But they're going to do it carefully, and they're going to be surgical as opposed to beyond surgical. And, you know, there's a lot they can do. But Israel is going to have to defend itself.
They have to be surgical and careful. And, you know, I don't think there's too many people that would say that they were surgical and careful in the Gaza war. It's going to piss people off, and I don't give a shit. That was not surgical. That was not. Yeah.
I know. I'm just saying, I don't even know how many people are really all that pissed off about this stuff anymore.
There's
It's
still
gone
some.
on. I'm of course there will always be, but this stuff cycles through so many times. And that's part of what Trump is doing, is cycling all these stories through so many times because it eventually burns them out. People don't want to continue engaging with this. Does anybody know the status of the Russia-Ukraine war right now?
I actually just saw a thing today with like guys playing video games, one from Russia, one from Ukraine, and they're talking to each other and they're like, oh yeah, I fled to whatever to get away from the war and all this. And then I saw another video where it's like a real life guy, soldier going in and shooting at Russians. Yeah, I don't.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, so that was the biggest issue in the world. People had changed the emojis on their social media profiles. They had hung blue and yellow flags from their houses, and the war is still going. What happened to all the interest in it? The interest has gone to zero, and they still bring up stories every now and then, and nobody cares.
Yep.
What happened?
Yep. Actually, two stories I got to get to. I lied. U.S. soldier charged with using classified information to profit from prediction market bets. And this guy, Ken Van Dyke, a U.S. Army soldier, is charged with unlawful use of confidential government information for personal gain, theft of non-public government information, commodities fraud, wire fraud, and making an unlawful monetary transaction. Van Dyke used sensitive classified information to make wagers on Polymarket, anticipating the planning and execution of the military operation to capture Nicolas Maduro, and used his access to classified information about that operation to personally profit. Van Dyke signed non-disclosure agreements never to divulge, publish, or reveal by writing, words, conduct, or otherwise any classified or sensitive information. He ended up making, I don't know, I think about $400,000 or something like that off a $33,000 bet. I thought, and this is just my personal opinion on this, but I thought that Trump's, when he was asked about this, his response was unbelievable. Check this out.
Mr. President, apparently there was a special forces soldier who was involved in the capture of Venezuelan President Maduro, who was arrested by federal authorities today on suspicion of insider trading and betting on Polymarket. Are you concerned that federal employees are betting on these prediction markets and potentially getting rich?
Well, I don't know about it, but was he betting that they would get him or they wouldn't get him?
It sounds like he was betting on his removal from office, that Maduro would be removed.
Well, that's
it sounds like
interesting.
he was involved in the operation.
That's like Pete Rose betting on his own team. It's a little like Pete Rose. Pete Rose, they kept him out of the Hall of Fame because he bet on his own team. Now, if he bet against his team, that would be no good, but he bet on his own team. I'll look into it. Yeah.
Good.
No, I mean, the whole world being a casino now it's really true. And it's crazy. And you have to wonder why that has opened up so much. Although I'll tell you what, man, I would rather like have to go through the period of people figuring out that maybe it's not a good idea to spend all day on the phone, placing bets, hoping to get the same dopamine hits that you can no longer get on social media. Like, people are going to have to find that out the hard way. Should the government be regulating this stuff and stopping it from happening? And, you know, that question should be asked about so many parts of our society, because if you want the government to stop behavior like that, you have to give them the power to stop a whole bunch of behaviors you don't want them to stop too. And the truth is, I don't think the government should have any sort of power like that. We're going to have to be able to regulate our own behavior at some point. And if we can't do that, begging for government solutions is really not going to fix the problem.
I think what Trump said there, what President Trump said there, is a veiled shot at Congress, and this whole prosecution, or this whole, you know, indictment against a, you know, special forces guy that literally put his life on the line, as we're told, as the story is told. This was a crazy mission, and the discombobulator and everything else. And, you know, the guy we saw the Medal of Honor recipient at the State of the Union that, you know, had the shot legs and everything else, and all of this stuff that we hear. And this guy like made like a $33,000 bet, which, you know, is probably a good chunk of his life savings. We don't get paid a whole lot in the military. And basically was making a bet that, hey, if I win this, I'm set for, you know, I've got a good chunk of change. If I lose this, I'm probably dead, so it doesn't matter, right? Like 33,000 doesn't matter. I'm probably not coming back from this. I don't have a problem with this. Again, what Trump said there, you know, Pete Rose, I've been one of the staunchest defenders of Pete Rose. Pete Rose bet on baseball. Pete Rose only bet on the Reds and his team, and never bet on his team to lose. I have no problem with that whatsoever. If you bet on your own team to win, because that's the outcome that you can't control. You can control if you lose, right? You throw a game, whatever the case might be. That's cool. But Trump bringing that up was very interesting, and also saying, you know, this is what our Congress has been doing forever. Insider trading. We talk about Pelosi. We talk about, you know, just all of Congress in some form or fashion has the ability. Whether or not they all act on it, we don't know, but we know that a ton of them do, right? We can just see Pelosi's stock trades are better than anybody in the world. 800% gains on her husband's trades. And so I don't know, this kind of shines light on it. It's going to cast a really bad shadow that you're going after the elite of the elite in our military, somebody that pulled off an operation like that, but Congress is still allowed to do this without any ramification, without any repercussion. I like this story.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good take on it. There's also the factor that they're going after Trump for the same sorts of things that people in or close to the administration are betting on events before they happen. I don't know if you saw JD Vance's joke or whatever it was, the strange comment he made in that same press event yesterday, where he said like something about Marco placing his bet on Polymarket. So that was weird on its own. What will happen if Trump, in his post that he made this morning about the fakery in the 2020 election and how all of that should be wiped from the record books, what happens to all the bets that were placed on the outcome of the 2020 election that casinos paid out on, and that people either collected on or had to pay in on? And then also, yeah, no, I'll just stop there. Because,
no, you're right.
Yeah.
No, keep going.
No, I thought I had another note, but it was the thing that I just addressed in terms of the op toward suggesting that Trump is corrupt for allowing hints of these future actions that he's going to take that are preceded by the bets that are being placed. And it's important to remember that the markets, the betting markets, the stock market, all of it, there are manipulations in those markets. And you can even just manipulate them by flooding the other side, you know? So it's, again, levels to all this stuff. It seems like they're trying to pin this one on Trump, and that it's not going to work because they never work.
All right, let's we got about 12 minutes left. We could probably take one or two calls, but I want to make sure that we got everything else lined up here. So let's run through the rants here real quick. Black Hat Destroyer, monthly supporter. Thank you. Appreciate that. Makes sense to me. Tomorrow is my wife's birthday. Happy birthday, ladies. Happy birthday to your wife. And of course, happy birthday to my wife. Oh, happy birthday to your wife tomorrow. Happy birthday to my wife today. Like the third time I've said it, babe. So if you happen to actually make it through the whole show, which she probably didn't, she probably listened till her name was mentioned, was in like, okay, I don't have to kill him tonight. And totally figuratively kill me, not literally. Although if that does happen, just throw that out there. Just totally kidding, guys. Anyways, D Carol B or 8. Excuse me, that's an 8. I'm curious, what is the need to gerrymander if the elections are stolen? Is it a matter of who gets to steal them? Thanks, guys. Love your input.
Well,
I think good.
Yeah. The need to gerrymander in an actual sense is because it changes the stories that can be successfully told, and it changes the landscape on which you can tell those stories. So I would just say it's another narrative element of selling the self-deluding psyop that is an American election.
Yeah, I agree with that. But in the literal sense of like legislation, just creates more D's versus R's, or more R's versus D's.
Right, but how do congressmen vote? Right, their votes are whipped based on what they're supposed to do. A centralized control system dictating to our representatives how they must vote,
right,
so that they can sell it to us that it was our decision.
Right, that's the point. More R's versus D's, and that's all it is. It's just it's just putting everybody into a bucket. And which bucket are you going to go with, the left bucket or the right bucket? And that's all it is. There is no independent thinking anymore. And there's literal documentation of this. You can watch like representations of votes and how partisanship has evolved over the last 100 years, and it's shocking. It really is. Like there actually used to be debate amongst our elected officials, quote unquote elected officials, and it's all completely gone. Chris is right. It's just, if you're an R, you go this way. If you're a D, you go that way. And the term whip is not, it's supposed to be figurative, but it's literal. They literally are going to whip you.
Well, the other thing also is that they determine the proportions too. So it's not like the leader of the Republicans is making sure to get every single Republican on. It's to make sure that every Republican who is on one side and every Republican who is on the other side are all telling the proper stories to the people to make whatever the vote is going to be sensible and appear as the choice of the people's representatives.
Correct. Doc Amish from PA, why we vote, name change to why should we vote? Yeah, I'm still trying to say, still trying to stay optimistic. Stay optimistic. There we go. Black Hat Destroyer, I heard a news report last night that the New York Mets fans want Mamdani to stop coming to Mets games so they could win more often. The Mets have been on a 12-game losing streak. Yeah, apparently somebody took a picture with the Mets little guy, the mascot, and they've lost every game since. Apparently.
Yeah, I heard that. That's so funny.
Supposedly, the Mets fans believe that Mamdani cursed their team when he came to Shea Stadium and greeted Mr. and Mrs. Met. And after that, the 12-game losing streak. Yeah, there it is from Black Hat. Was it Mamdani, though? I thought it was somebody else.
I think it was Mamdani, although there was also a post that I saw where Richard Levine, who was the transformer in charge of Biden's health department or whatever, like the 4-star major or whatever. Oh. I don't remember what. I don't think there's 4-star majors, just for the record. But he was an admiral or something. Didn't they give him like a military rank for that position? I guess he was there also. So yeah, the Mets have had some pretty bad associations. It reminds me of when I was in New York City in 2001, in the months leading up to 9/11, and Rudy Giuliani was on the cover of the New York tabloids every day for having like some affair at Gracie Manor. And I'm not suggesting anything about Giuliani. I don't know if the story was true. I don't care. I just remember riding the subway and seeing it on the covers of people's papers every day. I didn't know shit about the New York mayor, so I wasn't involved or interested. I just remember those headlines. Nonstop Rudy takedown.
Yep. It was Mamdani. I was just fact checking that in the background. I remember when they tried to take Rudy down in in that movie where they're like, oh, he was trying to get with like a 16-year-old girl. Remember that one where they're like, take your pants off. And then you find out that the girl's actually 21 and Rudy was kind of like, no. But anyways, Logistics girl, rarely get to catch a live question. Why is it, or is there a way to just ask for a paper ballot when voting? Is there an avenue in the states where that is possible? So the problem isn't that you're getting a paper ballot. Most states use a paper ballot in some form or fashion. The problem is that they take that paper ballot and they run it through a machine. That machine tabulates the votes without giving you a receipt to know what the machine is tabulating. You still, even if you had a receipt that shows what you voted for, you still don't know for certain that that's how the machine calculated it. And then when you try and do audits on that, they give you a ballot image of a video, a digital representation of your physical paper ballot and tell you that this is exactly what that ballot says, knowing full well that the scanner can manipulate that image to make it say whatever the fuck they want it to say.
I think the only thing to add to that is that a lot of people, when they talk about wanting a paper ballot, they believe that the paper ballot comes with the hand marking and the hand counting and the post-election verifiability. And the paper ballot, as you just described it, includes none of those things. And so it's important to know that the fix is not just, can we get quote unquote paper ballots?
Yes. The BMDs and some of the DS200s, those machines actually do the marking for you. The whole election thing is just it's a joke, and they hide behind things like there's an auditable paper trail, but they always forget to mention that like it takes an act of God to get access to that auditable paper trail, because they've now taken the ballot image and they say, this is the same exact thing. You guys can look at this. It's easier. No. Well, we want to see the physical paper ballots. And that's why Fulton County is so important. And that's why I think Maricopa, and I've said this all along, I was going to open the phone lines, but we're going to run out of time. I've said this all along. This is why Maricopa was the one quote unquote victory that they gave us in the 2020 election, because the paper ballots were housed directly in their jurisdiction by an NGO. And I firmly believe that NGO finagled those ballots and messed around with those ballots. And that's why they weren't quite as concerned about looking at the physical paper ballots in Maricopa County, because of the relationship that they have with the printer that is right there in their backyard. The reports of them bringing ballots in for 10 days, 12 days after the voting, all of that stuff. Maricopa County was not the scapegoat, but the example that they wanted to say. So everything was fine in Maricopa County. Stop with all this nonsense across the country, guys. I think that was deliberate, is what I'm saying.
Isn't it the case in Arizona? You'll know better than me, and I don't mean to slight this company that people can probably guess from the description. Isn't there a company that prints the ballots, sends the ballots, and then at the end receives the ballots and counts the ballots?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so, and do they have same day registration there? If they have, just think about this. Maybe they don't. I don't know. This argument is not contingent on same day registration. I'm just saying that understanding that the registration system is already flawed and broken and easy to manipulate, you can submit new registrations, create a ballot for that registration, have a record of the ballot being sent out and received and counted without a ballot traveling to any other place and without the voter even existing.
They don't have same day registration.
Okay.
You have to be registered 29 days in advance in Maricopa, according to the machine.
And when does the mail-in phase start there?
I don't know all this off the top.
Because that would be the other function, the other aspect of that would affect what I'm saying.
So in the 2020 election, they sent out massive amounts of ballots, right? They sent almost universal. I don't think you had to request one. To your point, that company, they're the ones responsible for mailing them out. When they mail it back, it goes to them. They store them there. They document everything. They don't open them, allegedly. They hide them behind a door. It's crazy if you ever see this door. They hide them in a room where they vinyled over the door to make it look like a safe vault. So if you look at it from far away, it looks like it's a big safe vault, like in a bank, and you have to have a code to get in there. But then you get up and you realize it's just a normal door with a piece of vinyl over it that makes it look like a vault. There's no accountability. There's no oversight. Chain of custody documents are woefully inadequate and missing. And Reuters just ran a hit piece specifically on the claims about Maricopa County. So stand by, guys. Lots coming out. I stand by my words that company is corrupt as hell. And I've written about them extensively. You can figure out who it is. So we'll land that there. What you got coming up, brother?
I will be on DPH with John tomorrow night, and I think getting close to releasing new writing on Substack. I'm your moderator.substack.com. All
right. And I will be on Why We Vote later tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Eastern with Ash. It is a pre-record, but it's a pretty good episode. We talk about Virginia. We talk about Act Blue. We talk about the NIC memo that just came out. We're going to get into that pretty heavily. And I don't think anything has popped up since that recording yet, but it'll be a good episode. So tune into that, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks, Chris. Have a great weekend, brother.
You too.
I don't say this lightly. This lotion changes people.
My knuckles would actually start to crack. Started using the soft disclosure lotion, and I am very impressed. Even within just a few days, I've noticed a tremendous difference.
That's not a script. That's what happens when something actually works.
It puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Yeah, that line keeps coming up. Because when you don't use it, your skin starts acting up.
Every single ingredient in soft disclosure is intentionally chosen. There's no filler ingredients. It is not like this BS product where they have a bunch of ingredients. Every ingredient listed is for a purpose.
Over 65-star reviews for the lotion alone. Not influencers, not actors, just people whose skin finally shut up. Soft disclosure lotion. Once you try it, you'll understand why people won't stop talking about it. Visit softdisclosure.com and use code BADLANDS and get 10% off.